What did you do last week? Well, for about 2 million federal employees, what they did was get that email. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And that was the subject line, gentlemen, to the email that went out to, like I said, some 2 million federal employees. Every time I say that number and say federal employees, it gives me a very creepy chill down my spine to think that there are that many people working for the federal government. In any case, the email went out in an endeavor to find out what the people who work for your federal government are actually doing with their time. This went out under the authorization, Stephen Green, of the President of the United States, who shortly before that email went out, because there are some, I'm saying this up front, Steve, because there are some accusations that Elon Musk is some sort of rogue who's just, a bull in a china closet, just, ramming through the government. The president had just posted on Truth Social that he wants Elon Musk to get more aggressive. And then Elon Musk's team sends out this email that says, hey, send us an email summarizing what you did last week. The concern there was that some people would never even get the email because they're working for the federal government, but they're not really working for anybody. And the other concern was that there are so many people doing things that nobody even knows what they're doing that they need to have a level of accountability. Steve, do you think it's crazy or unreasonable to make this request? And I guess the follow-up would be, is this kind of level of almost micromanaging accountability something that ought to be an ongoing aspect in order for them to continue employment? In other words, the implication was answer this email or be terminated. Now, since then, we've seen that they said, well, they're not going to be terminated right away. If they are terminated, we'll probably give them a second chance. But in any case, do you think that this should this be something that they ordinarily do, or do you think this is a little too intrusive?
Well, you said micromanaging, and I'm going to disagree with that word completely. There's no micromanagement here. They didn't send out an email to 2 million federal employees. Ooh, you're right. That does feel bad to say. Saying, send us a detailed email justifying your existence here. They didn't do anything like that. What they wanted was 5 bullet points of what you did this week, and
now I think that's how Commerce handled it. Commerce gave guidance to the staff and said, the Department of Commerce said, give us 5 bullet points. But I think different agencies have approached it in different ways. But yeah, that's in essence what we're talking about.
Yeah, and wow, I mean, I could do this off the top of my head. Last week I hosted a Right Angle segment. I sat in on 2 other Right Angle segments. I was on the backstage segment that we record for members for an hour. Over at PJ Media, I wrote about a dozen columns, and I was a co-host on a couple of VIP Gold live chats. And my VIP pitches drew in this many new members, and my columns generated this much traffic. And it was a pretty good week, so there you go. And in the private sector, this sort of thing is a daily or weekly ritual in much of the business world. So asking federal workers to do something that their private sector counterparts do as a regular routine doesn't seem like too much to ask. But that's not entirely what's going on here, Scott. You happen to mention people who aren't working. Well, I think one of the reasons for this email is to find people who don't exist. That those federal payrolls are bloated. We just don't know where the suckers are, or maybe I should say where the ghosts aren't, something like that. And non-response to this email isn't, you're fired, Donald Trump at the end of The Apprentice, just getting rid of people left and right. This is the start of a hunt for the people who don't exist, for the people who don't show up, and beginning the process of clearing the roles of no-show positions and clearing the roles of deadweight who don't show up at the office, who don't return emails, that sort of thing. So there's something wrong here. This is one great way, one simple way of eliminating some of that waste that DOGE was set up to find and help eliminate.
Bill Whittle, there is an old a saying, an idea in business that bureaucrats can outlast any new leader. And the federal government is probably the best at this of anyone. There are people who've been working for decades through various administrations, and nobody even knows they're there. They kind of keep their head down. They show up, they get their work done, they go home, and they're never called to account because they just continue to function regardless of what's going on. If the president says, we're going to change the way we do things, they say, oh, okay, sure. And then they keep doing things the way that they've always been doing them. In this case, the response from various agencies has been, they've responded in different ways, Bill. The Energy Department and the Justice Department both instructed their employees to hold on and wait a little bit. The Justice Department expressed concern about sensitive information being included in the answer to this email of what did you do last week. So both of those departments have basically said, hold and await further instructions. Commerce and Treasury both said, answer the email. And as Steve pointed out, the Commerce Department gave them direction on how to answer that email. The Social Security Administration sent out an email to its employees and said, look, this is a legitimate assignment. It is not spam. And I guess if I got an email that appeared to be from Elon Musk or one of his lieutenants, I would probably at first think it was spam as well. So that's fair. But in any case, they're saying, yeah, that's a legitimate assignment. You should do it. And Bill, Elon has basically said, look, if somebody doesn't answer this time, it's not going to get them fired. But we're going to give them a second chance, and if they don't answer that time, then they'll be terminated. Is that too harsh of a punishment, or is this just kind of a way of making a point that it's not really necessary that the president follow through and actually can these people?
Well, first, let me just respond to what you started with, this idea that that bureaucrats believe that they can outlast any leadership, and that's true, but they can't outlast them if they're fired. And this is the revolution that Donald Trump is bringing into this. He's not talking about reforming agencies or issuing instructions to bureaucrats that can then be conveniently ignored or acted upon so slowly that nothing ever gets done. He's simply removing them. Yeah. I personally think that this, and I think Elon basically said so much himself, as Steve pointed out. I think the fundamental thing about this first email blast was this is the equivalent of saying we're thinking about annexing Greenland. I don't think annexing Greenland was ever in the cards. What we wanted from Greenland was more economic access, and we wanted some more military bases. And when the Danes found out that America was openly floating the idea of us essentially just sending some tanks over and capturing Greenland, first thing they did was, how about if we just give you more economic access and more military bases? Would that be okay? Well, we'll think about it for the time being. So think about what this email basically said. This email basically said, if you don't respond to this in 48 hours with something that is astonishingly easy to do, right? There's not a bureaucrat on the planet who can't come up with 20 things that he did last week, whether he did them or not, right? This is the skill that bureaucrats have. So you gotta take a step back from what it looked like it was and get to what it was. What it was a sonar ping to see who is not answering emails at all because they don't exist or have been out of the federal government and continue to get paid. That's what this was, in my opinion. It was just a sonar ping to see where the reflections are coming in. And when you looked at what we saw from just this initial look at Social Security, Scott, where what was the number? It was something like Social Security has 21 million people over the age of 100, and the actual number of people in the country over the age of 100 is 83,000, which I think is, I forget the number now, 256 fictional people for every real person. The amount of fraud and the amount and the brazenness, that's the term I'm looking for. No one has ever looked into the federal government that I'm aware of on this level, certainly not in my lifetime, and I don't think ever. The brazenness of having generation after generation after generation saying, one of the things you get with this job is you get the payroll of 4 employees who retired in 1946, 1959, 1963, and 1972, right? Those checks just come to you. Yeah. That's what I think this thing was. But on a higher level, that's a kind of the tactical level. On a sort of a strategic or a meta level, not only is there nothing wrong with asking what you did last week, if this question is causing you to lose sleep, then chances are you probably should be losing some sleep. Elon famously took over Twitter and fired 90% of the staff, and it ran more smoothly. He looked at USAID, staff of 14,000 down to 250 to do the essential purposes that USAID was designed to do, which is namely actually provide American foreign aid to people who are in actual need that's in our national interest. So I think the whole thing was a giant head fake. I think the whole thing was designed to see, number one, which email addresses did not file a reply, period. No, nothing, just silence. Look at those people first. And then I think the reason that people are having such a cow over it was because this idea that if you don't reply, you're going to be fired meant that every single legitimate member of the federal bureaucracy had a strong incentive to reply, meaning that you couldn't claim that these no replies were people that got the email and just decided to forget it. You see what I'm saying? He made it imperative to reply to this so that anybody who doesn't reply probably doesn't exist.
Hey, Scott, can I throw something in?
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
When I was in high school, Missouri Military Academy, we had an escalation of offenses. Let's say my platoon sergeant noticed I had a scuff on my shoes, and he tells me to shine my shoes, and I don't shine them. Well, he sees me in the afternoon. The scuff's still there on my shoes, so he writes me up for what was called NFI, not following instructions. And that's a minor infraction. I lose about an hour of my free time during the next break. Well, if I still don't shine them and he sees at night that my shoes are still scuffed, he might write me up for, I believe it was called DDI, did not follow definite instruction. And that's an escalated offense where now I'm going to lose an entire afternoon of my free time. We had precious free time, maybe like 10 hours a week. And if in the morning when we're lining up for formation again, that scuff is still on my shoes, he might write me up for DDO, disobeyed direct order, which means I've now lost a month of my free time. The offense didn't really change. It's just an unshined shoe. But I escalated it through my refusal to follow a simple instruction. And I think that's what we're going to see here with this DOGE email.
I think the thing that sort of amused me was how the unions that represent some federal workers and Democratic politicians and then some other kind of unnamed people in government, when asked to write a simple, brief email saying summarizing what they did last week, had the Greta Thunberg response, It's like, how dare you? Like that, the shock
in my dreams.
The shock that they've been asked to provide just a cursory overview of what they might have done during the previous alleged 40 weeks of activity or 40 hours of activity was just way beyond the pale of what any employee should ever be expected to produce. So, that to start with. And then the artificial outrage among Democratic politicians. There was one representative, a congressman from Virginia, Jerry Connolly, who put it in these terms because he doesn't just want the federal workers to be outraged. He wants you to be outraged, and he thinks this will do it. This is a quote from that congressman. "This stunt is yet another example of the cruel and arbitrary chaos Mr. Musk inflicts on who? The American people, by carelessly taking a chainsaw to the people's government and the dedicated public servants who keep it running." Well, Representative Connolly, I would suggest that the dedicated public servants who keep it running might be able to give us a brief overview of their dedication from last week. It doesn't have to have a lot of detail in it. Just give us a sense of how dedicated you are. In fact, if anything, Congressman, this is an opportunity to let the President of the United States, who looks askance at government bureaucracy, let him know the value that you bring to the equation, the reason why it's been essential to have you for all of these years, the reason why you have not only earned your paycheck, but your pension and the various other perks that go with government employment, including the ability to, retire with 2 different government pensions, depending on what you do after your initial retirement. So, if you are legitimately serving the taxpayers of these United States, if the American people are primary in your gaze as you get up each morning and you think, how can I serve the public, then it should be a joy for you to write this email response. In fact, you should have been already sending such an email to your supervisor every week just because you're so excited about the value you provide to the American taxpayers. And this, if nothing else, this will help you get through these trying times where this unreasonable president of the United States and his billionaire man Friday is bossing you around and demanding to know whether you actually did anything to earn your paycheck. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.